Ayubowan everyone. Welcome to the Prabodha Dewanarayana show. Today, it's a very special day. We have a very special guest for our podcast, Professor Bailey. Professor Bailey, welcome to the show.
Thank you for
Bailey,
having me.
You're most welcome. Before go ahead and talk about our topic today, can you please introduce yourself to our audience, ma'am, please?
Sure. Thank you for having me. So my name is Maha Bailey. I am a professor of practice at the Center for Learning and Teaching at the American University in Cairo. So my main job is to help other professors teach better. And so that's what my center does. I also teach undergraduate students digital literacies and intercultural learning, which includes AI as well. And I do a lot of public scholarship work as well. I co-facilitate Equity Unbound, which I'll talk about later as we go through the interview.
Okay. Now, before discuss our topic, let's start from your first degree, your undergrad days. Like, how did you get into your undergraduate programs? What inspired you to pursue a PhD? And can you please tell us about your journey, ma'am?
I'm going to start with when I was 10 years old.
That's
I was born and raised in Kuwait.
Uh-huh.
And so in 1990, there was an invasion of Kuwait. So we had to leave. And I had to leave my school. So my school was a British school that was based in Kuwait. And then I had to come here to Egypt to a school that was a different quality. And I was almost 11 at the time. And I looked at the school and I was like, education needs to improve in this country. I need to work on it someday. Then I went back to Kuwait eventually after everything was calm there. I finished my high school. I did GCSEs and A-levels. And the American University in Cairo, where I did my undergrad, which is also where I work now, is at the time, it was the best private English language institution here in Egypt. And I knew that the education system was good. I was considering medical school, which they don't have here. Both of my parents are doctors, and my husband is a doctor, but I didn't know him at the time. But it's Egyptian public education, which is mass education, huge numbers of people, very big problems with quality and honestly with corruption as well. So a lot of my friends were here at AUC. I was accepted here. I had a good scholarship. And so I came to AUC, and I didn't know that I wanted to study computer science, which is what I originally, which is why I ended up studying. Wow. Basically, I was the kind of person where during my GCSEs, if something goes wrong with the computer, I don't know what to do. So I go and pray to God that he would solve the problem, and I restart the computer. After I finished my degree in computer science, I discovered that actually it's the restart that's working. Probably. I mean, hopefully the prayers work too, but just the solution. You solve everything by either hitting it or restarting it, right? All devices up until now. This has not changed in 20 years. So I studied computer science eventually because it was what I found it most challenging. I was considering studying business or something else, and I had already done business and advanced level business in school, and it wasn't that interesting for me. It was intuitive. I didn't feel like I needed to study it. So I studied computer science, which was challenging and interesting, and I did well in it. But I didn't continue. I knew there was something not right because I'm a very sociable person. And this was not the major where you get to socialize a lot. So I would be in university doing my classes, but then I want to do a lot of extracurricular activities. And towards the end, my thesis was about AI. It was about neural networks and using machine learning to predict stock market prices. And so in the process of learning about this, I learned a lot about how the brain works.
Like, when was this? Like, I know AI, personally, I got to know about AI very recent, like with the ChatGPT,
No, it's been there for a very long time. It's been there for a very long time. Since World War II, there's been stuff going on. Just not what we have now. Not as advanced as ChatGPT, but there was neural networks that existed for a really long time. They've been using it in the medical field for a very long time. So anyway, but in the process at the time, the fields of neuroscience and imaging of the brain and understanding how the brain works was happening in parallel with AI. And there are different types of AI, obviously, but neural networks and machine learning are supposed to mimic the way your brain works. So then I became
Wow.
more interested in how the human brain works than in how to use computers to mimic that.
Wow.
And I went back to when I was 10 years old and I was interested in education. I worked
Mm-hmm.
in the IT field in a corporate multinational for a little bit, and I
Mm-hmm.
realized I read a book and I
Mm-hmm.
realized that this is not my mission in life. It's not my mission in life to do information technology for a company that sells shampoo and soap. I
Okay.
was like, I need to do something more useful in my life. And I was doing a lot of NGO work, helping communities that were underprivileged. And then I was like, no, wait a minute. Can't I just like study education and do something in education? So I
Yeah.
went back and took an educational psychology course. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I really want to change careers. And this opening was here. Obviously, I wasn't a professor when I first came here. I was just 2 years out of college. Did
Mm-hmm.
the master's in e-learning and did a PhD in education. And my PhD had nothing to do with technology. It was about
Wow.
critical thinking,
Yes, I saw
which
it. Yeah.
is, yeah. So,
Wow. I mean, when you say all these things, I feel like you just like you are very like comfortable with it. Okay, I did my master's with like, then I did my PhD. Like, but I know it's how hard it is to do
hard.
all those things. Yeah,
It's really hard.
that's the thing. And one more question now. I'm also like got my bachelor's from film and television. Now I'm pursuing my master's in mass communication. So in my lecture hall, we learn a lot of theories, ma'am. Like, okay, there are like, there are a ton of theories. So I'm sure that you have also studied those theories in your field. So do you think that the things that we are learning in academia or like in higher education institutes, like how can we actually like use it? Like when I'm teaching also, some people are asking me like, okay, when can we use these like things in the practical world? So did you face that
Mm.
problem of I'm learning all these theories, when can I use these things, like, or you just enjoyed and you just like made theories by yourself, or what did you do?
That's a great question. I love this question. So, first of all, we are not from the countries that most of these theories came from, right? You and I.
Yeah. Yes.
So sometimes the theories don't really apply. And I
Yes.
think if you're from Europe or America, those theories came from someone who has a similar context to you. So
Mhm.
probably the theory might resonate a little bit more, even though I think all students feel like theories don't connect with them, but I'm sure it's easier to make those connections. Whereas in our context, sometimes the theory doesn't make sense or it doesn't apply or it looks different. So I think one of the realizations, but when I was older, I realized this,
Mhm. Mhm.
is that actually sometimes I have to make my own theory, as you're saying, because
Yeah.
somebody else's framework was based
Mhm.
on their story, and I have a very
Mhm.
different experience, and this doesn't apply. So a lot of things during the pandemic, for example, that people did, they
Mhm.
wouldn't work in Egypt. Like you can't do that in Egypt. You have all kinds of structural issues, you have cultural issues, you have a different family situation, people live in different ways. The
Mhm.
relationship between teachers and students is different. So you have to do the solution that works for your context based on what you understand about human beings.
Mhm.
But even though human beings share a lot in common, there's a lot of social and cultural and technical and economic factors that you have to take into consideration. So that's really important. I know I definitely struggled. So when I was, first of all, people who do their PhDs are not typical people. So
Yeah.
when you become a professor, you actually have no idea what your students are like because you were not like them. You were
Mhm.
probably someone who enjoyed education. So I'm
Yeah.
someone who found education easy up
Mhm.
until the master's level.
Mhm.
I only started to struggle with a PhD. And if you don't struggle with your PhD, there's something wrong because it's a whole other level of looking at knowledge and unpacking it and being able to critique it and say, actually, I'm not going to take the theory you gave me. There's something wrong with this theory, right?
Wow.
Like all through your life, you're following someone's theory and applying it. But when you're the PhD, you need to be able to question and create
Mhm.
something new.
Mhm.
Um, and so that was difficult for me because I kept trying to find myself in other people's theories and not find myself. I
Mhm.
know one of the theories that resonated with me, two people whose theories resonated with me a lot were Homi Bhabha and Edward Said.
Mhm.
And this is because generally people from the Indian region
Mhm.
and people who have Arab origin, but who
Mhm.
have a westernized education, they're closer to who I am. I'm not pure Egyptian. I am pure Egyptian. My parents are Egyptian. I have no genes that are not Egyptian. I mean, ancestors, but no immediate family who are not Egyptian. But I've
Mhm.
always had a British or an American education.
Yeah.
So the way I'm taught to think about the world is very westernized. And at the same time, I understand my identity, and I understand that the British have colonized my country. I understand that that there's after effects of coloniality continuing, and we have neo-colonialism from the US. I've worked in a multinational American company, so I understand American origin company. So I understand all of that. And I'm trying to use my knowledge to improve what's happening in my country, but not in a colonialist way. I work in an institution right now that is basically colonial,
I
neo-colonialist
was about to say that.
So, but at the same time, I also think about, so both, Homi Bhabha talks about hybridity, cultural hybridity, right? And that really resonated a lot. I'm not pure anything. I'm a hybrid of everything that I've learned and been in all my experiences. And Edward Said helped me understand cultural imperialism better, right? And also, Edward Said helped me understand how to see something from somebody else's point of view without losing your own identity. And then Paulo Freire and Ira Shore have a beautiful book called Pedagogy of Liberation that really helped me think about all of this. And it is that if you're living in a place where the dominant culture is what is going to empower you economically and is going to empower you. So you still have to teach people the dominant culture in order for them to succeed. So I still have to teach people English because they will be more successful in their lives if they speak English. But I still need them to be critical of the culture they're getting because they're reading and listening in English. And so you look at someone like Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie from Nigeria, who has a beautiful TED Talk called The Danger of a Single Story. And she's an author herself. And she talks about how growing up, she would read in English. So she would write stories about people with blue eyes who eat apples. But she lives in Nigeria where nobody has blue eyes. Nobody eats apples. They eat mangoes. And why is she doing that? And I realized that a lot of my students are like that. So I try to bring in, they get to read a lot of authors from this part of the world or from global South in general, and not just be exposed to Western knowledge. And so always questioning knowledge that's only coming from one part of the world. So that's a big part of, a big part of how I think about theory in general, right? Like you can try to understand someone else's theory, but you should also look at your experiences and try to step away from the theory and see if you come up with something different than what other people's theories gave you, and see what you're going to do with it.
Wow, I just want to tell you, ma'am, like my mind is blown, like just like a couple of minutes into the podcast, like serious, like honestly, like the way you are thinking is really nice. Like to be really honest with you, I haven't thought in that manner about things. But when you are talking, I was like I was putting your speech into my context, and like I was saying, how she's telling the truth, like it's just truth. But my next question is like, yes, what you are saying is like that's the utter truth. But can the other people, when you are teaching in your classroom, in your lectures, are they understanding it? Or are they like arguing, no, madam, it's not the thing, like this is how the world works? Like what happens in the lecture room when you bring out all these ideas?
Yeah. So I'm lucky that I teach small classes. So I have like 20 students. And I don't tell them this. They learn it. They construct it socially. We have conversations and we have different readings. And so, for example, one of the most beautiful readings that we read is by a Lebanese author called Lina Munzir. It's called War in Translation. And she's basically somebody who translates the Syrian refugee women. They tell stories in Arabic and she translates them into English. And her article is all about how the violence of translation, because you change somebody's meaning when you translate their work. Exactly. And also then the impact on the translator of carrying all this trauma of the people she's translating. And but in the process, she also talks about what it means to speak a language other than your own. And first of all, it's very relevant to the topic of the course in terms of intercultural learning and identity. And they start to question why they read more in English, why they speak more in English, what it means, what do they lose in terms of meaning when they don't use their native language to express certain things? What are some words in Arabic that cannot be expressed in English because culturally they don't have meaning in English? So we talk about that. They also talk about the connotations of war in different languages and how the expression makes a huge difference. But then now that we're also talking a lot about AI, AI does all this translation without context. So
Yes.
AI might
Exactly.
accurately translate that word, but it doesn't know the context. So a lot of times, obviously, Google Translate used to make mistakes in the languages that are less, not Latin languages, right? Latin language to Latin language is very easy translation. But I don't know what it's like in your native language and how much content exists, how much high quality content exists online in each of these other languages. And Arabic is one of the languages, there's a lot of content, but still.
Yeah, it's funny, you know, what we are doing is like, we just take like Sinhalese song, then we translate it in English. It's just the hilarious thing because it gives like another meaning.
Yeah, and like I was telling you before, like Arabic is not one thing. There's modern standard Arabic that we write, but nobody speaks. And then there's Egyptian Arabic, which is quite different.
Wow,
And so, yeah, so there's a lot of nuance that AI doesn't have, and it doesn't have your history. It doesn't know who you are. So how's it going to represent your thoughts when it doesn't know who you are at all? So that's one of the things. So I try to make sure that my students are exposed to perspectives on the world that are quite different than what they're being exposed to in the rest of their education in the same university, you know. And so they come up with their own conclusions at the end of all of this, even with AI. So we're going to talk about AI soon, right? And a lot of what I do with my students is I invite them to experiment with AI, and they, on their own, discover a lot of the biases that are reproduced in AI. And I can tell you more about this as we go on.
And before coming to that technology part, ma'am, I just want to ask you, like this like a very simple question, but like, why someone should like pursue higher education? For an example, in our country, most of the people are doing their masters or PhD mainly because of the economical factor. You know, you can get a good job, is high, and all those things. Like, like now you know about the education. Like, why someone should like learn? Like, because like, for an example, now I am married and I have family, and like I have to take care of it at the same time I'm doing masters. So like, I mean, I love it. Like, I really love it. Refresh my mind to talk to these professors and all those things. But for average person, like, what should be the motivation? Is there a one motivation, or are there like several motivations or factors?
It's a good question. I think there are different motivations for different people. So I think Egypt is a similar situation, I think, where people who do vocational education, so they study in high school a skill that they can start working with right away and they don't go to college, they can find a job easier. It's not going to be a high-paying job, but it's easier to get a job with those skills than to have a college degree necessarily. There's so many people who have the college degrees. And I have to be fair, some education is useless. Some higher education is really useless. It's so divorced from reality, and it doesn't build the soft skills that people actually need. And also at the same time, I think people who are motivated by short-term financial gain. So there's two kinds of people who are motivated by short-term financial gain. People who are very privileged and people who are very underprivileged. So people who are very privileged know that they will be financially stable no matter what. Either their parents have a company, they're going to work there, or they can start their own business because they have enough capital to start their own business. And if it fails, they'll be able to get back up again. And so for them, if they're talented in something that they can start a company in, they feel like, and they have the intuition for business, they're like, why do I need to do education? So that's one kind of person who's very privileged. And we have some of those here at AUC, and they don't want to be here. Or they're athletes, for example, and they just want to keep being professional athletes, whatever. So that's one group of people. But I think the bigger group of people is people who financially or economically can't afford not to make money. And so for them, the long-termism of the long-term financial benefit of education, it's too far away. So they don't have time to wait. They need to feed their families. So if you imagine like the oldest boy in a family where the father passed away, for example, and he has like 3 younger kids, that's not a person who has the privilege to wait 4 or 5 years until they graduate and then 5 more years until they get promoted and they have a good enough salary. So in that kind of context, I think higher education is failing those kinds of people. And I think some sorts of higher education aren't worth it. My university is a private university that people have to pay a lot of money for. So unless you get a scholarship, you're paying a lot of money that you're not going to get the first year you graduate out of college. So you need to be very privileged to do this. But I do think because my PhD topic was critical thinking.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think you can develop a little bit of critical thinking in school, but not most Egyptian schools. A lot of British and American and a little bit of French and German education, which we have here in Egypt, for some people who are privileged enough to have it, will develop a little bit of critical thinking where you can critique authority figures, where you can critique the news and all of that. So that all of that development is important. But in higher education, you can develop it a lot more. And then this critical thinking is what's going to make you a citizen who can make a difference long term. It's not just about being good enough to do a job. It's about being critical enough to transform the work that you're doing into something else, to do more, to recognize when something's not working and stop doing it, to Egypt had a revolution in 2011, and it was I was towards the end of my PhD, and I was thinking, oh, hey, these people have critical thinking. But then I realized after they said no, that they don't want this president anymore, they didn't know how to work together constructively to create a better reality that's more democratic. They only knew what they didn't want. And that's not enough. You need to also know how to work with people who have different ideologies for the good of everybody. And that's not something that I think most people can do if they don't have a good enough education to be able to absorb and work together with people who are very different from you. But then not all education exposes you to that. So you need to make sure that education prepares you for this a little bit.
You know what, like, I'm really competitive. Can you hear me now? I think now okay, right?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Yeah, okay. So it's very competitive. Like when it comes to education, people are like just like, by hearting things, and like, then they get to the undergrad, then they just like aim for the first class degree, and then after that the masters, then PhD, like, but they don't like, sit back and relax, and they don't, most of the people, I mean, like they don't think like, okay, what's the education and what's this for? And like basically like they have no idea, just like get the score, get the highest GPA, and on to the next one. So that's the main thing. But I'm glad that you have like clarified those things. I'm really glad.
But
And
it's really hard to do a PhD unless you're intrinsically motivated. I understand like the undergraduate degree and the master's, you can get by even if you're just doing it for the grade. But PhD and doing research, like in my UK-based PhD, it was only research. But in other PhD programs, you have some courses and then some research, right? It's very hard to do that research if you don't really, really want to do research. I think that's why a lot of people don't finish their PhDs. They start and they think it's going to be like every other education they've had, and then it's not, and they can't finish.
I will get back to that one also, because like I need your advice for that one also.
Sure.
Ma'am, like talking about the technology aspect now, AI, like, as I mentioned earlier, personally, I was really hyped about AI because of the Chat GPT, because it was like, a genie, like just answer my all the questions, and like, what should I eat for breakfast? These are the ingredients that I have. Like, okay, like it was like such a magical thing for me. But obviously, you have studied it before that. So when AI and education, like, what do you think, ma'am? Do you think AI helps education? Because on LinkedIn, I see some people are saying like, okay, you should not use AI for higher education purposes. You should avoid it. Some people say that, okay, it's okay. So what is your opinion about these things?
Okay, so first thing, I think it's too early to make a decision definitively. And second of all, I think it's contextual. I think it depends on what you teach. It depends on what your students need to learn. And it depends on what they already know and what they don't know. So let me tell you the example that I always use. Do you know how to bake? Can you bake a cake?
Well, I think my wife can bake it, but I can.
Your wife can. All right.
Yeah.
So if I asked you to bake a cake for me and you've never baked one before, you're going to make your wife do it?
I don't know what's the right answer, but
yeah, if you're competing with 10 other people and I'm going to give the best cake at a certain grade, would you buy one? Would you ask your wife to make one? Would you get a cake mix? What are you going to do? Are you going to learn to make cake from YouTube? What are you going to do?
To be honest with you, the most easiest thing is like I will ask like my wife, like, hey darling, like can you like, help me?
Exactly. So she's right there. So you're privileged that you have someone with you at home who can make a cake.
Yeah.
It's cheaper than having to buy one, right? Okay.
Yeah.
The thing we do in education is that we ask all the students to create the same outcome as an assessment, but we don't necessarily always check that they all have the skills they need to be able to do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, sometimes are we grading them on the taste of the cake, or are we grading them on the decoration of the cake?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Or is the cake just part of a party that they're organizing? So if I'm teaching people how to become like wedding planners, right? The wedding
Mm-hmm.
planner doesn't need to bake the cake themselves, right? They need to organize the entire thing and manage it, and they can outsource the cake making to someone
Mm-hmm.
else. So the outsourcing of cake making to someone else, you can either buy it from somewhere, or you can get a cake mix and get someone to do an easy cake, right? But if what I'm teaching them, this is baking school, you're learning to become a baker,
Yeah.
then you do need to know how to make the cake from scratch, right?
Yeah.
Now, if what I'm doing is cake decorating class in baking school, so we're still in baking school, but this is the cake decorating class, I want to focus on the decorating. So you can use a cake mix for that, so that you get the cake done quickly and you don't have to go get all the ingredients, and then you can decorate. But if then you're baking for people who have gluten and lactose allergies, then you might want to make it from scratch anyway, because you never know what's in the cake mix. Okay, so let's move this to AI, right? For me, AI is a little bit like the cake mix, is that it gives you a generic thing that's similar to what you're trying to do. So if what you're learning is not how to make cakes from scratch, I think it can be useful to use. It's going to save you time so that you can focus on more important things. With the caveat that the thing that it's making is not the most personalized, it's not the most unique, it's not about you, but maybe you're going to personalize it in all these other ways. So for example, we have professors here. So we have people who teach writing. Now, ChatGPT, basically all it does is write for the most part. So if you're teaching writing at the very, very early level, where students don't know how to write at all, and they give it to ChatGPT, they're going to get the result, but they're not going to get the learning. Yeah. But if they've already learned how to write, they know how to write well. And this is like a 300 level course. So it's in their 3rd year or 4th year of university. And they're learning how to write a cover letter. Okay. They can have ChatGPT, they can give ChatGPT some information and it'll create a cover letter for them quicker than if they had to do it themselves. And then they can edit it and make sure it's accurate and all that. So I think that's an okay use of ChatGPT to save time on the stuff that is relatively standard, so that you can spend more time on the special things. Same thing with, for example, using it for graphics. If I'm teaching students not graphic design, if I'm teaching them something else, and they just need to put a picture in there, they could take time to look for lots of different pictures and put them on top of each other, and it would take them like 3 hours. Or they could just ask ChatGPT to do it for them in 5 minutes, or DALL-E or something. And so if that's not what if I'm not spending time teaching my students how to create graphics, then I just want the graphic there very quickly. And if it's going to take them too long to create it themselves, then it's fine for me if they use it that way, so they can focus on the other thing, right? But even in fields like architecture and graphic design and so on, they have particular AIs that they endorse students to use, again, so that it saves time on something that's not the most important thing they're learning, so that they can spend more time doing the extra creative thing that they are doing. So my views on this are multiple directions. Every teacher teaching students who knows who their students are, they know what the students need to learn. The thing that they need to learn, they shouldn't be using AI. But the things that they should already know, it's okay to use AI, because they'll be able to go back and see if it did it correctly or not, or build on it. So it saves them time on certain things. I do think that if you use AI to give you content on a topic that you don't know very well, you won't know if it's hallucinating or if it's telling you correct stuff. So the more factual the information is, the less likely I would use AI. Even my daughter, who was like 11 or 12 at the time that ChatGPT came out, she was like, if I want a credible source, I'm going to Google it. I'm not going to use ChatGPT because it's not necessarily giving me accurate information. So that's important. So when we do it about our own field, we know when it's saying something wrong. The second thing is the biases and this kind of thing. It's more likely to happen when the knowledge we're asking ChatGPT to give us comes from a part of the world that it has not been exposed to. So the more you ask it about things from the Arab part of the world, the more likely it's going to make a mistake. And there was actually research that shows that the farther your culture is from US culture, the more likely ChatGPT is not going to give an answer similar to what you would give. So that was very interesting to see this research.
I've never thought in that context, because basically we are also like, even though I'm Sri Lanka, I always watch American shows. I'm basically like watching movies like Oppenheimer, basically like using English. So like for me, until you say that thing, okay, like there's culture behind it, like I really didn't pay attention to that, to be honest with you.
Well, this goes back to what I was saying earlier about translation and exposure to Western culture. You're used to things in English coming from an English language culture. So when you write in English, you want to sound like a native British or American speaker, not like a Sri Lankan. Even though my understanding, like I think a lot of people learn English in Sri Lanka, right?
Yes, they do actually. Yeah. But unfortunate thing is, ma'am, we do have a good like English curriculum and all those things, but when you look at these textbooks, like they are not like really teaching English. They just task based. Okay, you complete this task 10 points and
not for communication.
Yes, like they just don't like enjoy it. Like sometimes they are just neglecting the period. And even though in the university, ma'am, the main problem is a lot of people are like they are giving up on education because of the English issue. Because they do have a curriculum, but when they come to the university, the professors just started the lectures in English, but they don't understand it. Then they just the maximum score, then they give it up. So yes, English education is here, but I don't think like it is very effective at the moment, to be honest.
That's very interesting. And this is one of the things a lot of people are using ChatGPT to learn language, right? To interact, especially now that it has audio and things like that. I think it is pretty good at English. It's not so good at other languages again. So when people say, oh, ChatGPT is really good at learning languages, it can be your language tutor. I'm like, have you tried it in every single language out there? It's not that good in all the other languages. It's not bad. I don't know all the languages, but it's not bad in Arabic, but it's not always right. And it can make you say the wrong thing in the wrong context. But in English, it's pretty good. So you can have this interaction with it. There's other things though. There's a difference between the learners using ChatGPT and the teachers using ChatGPT. So back to the learners again, like other things, the learners. So here's what I think. I think if we give learners, so going back to the issue you were talking about, non-native speakers learning in English, which is the case in my institution. If the teachers insist on giving learners papers to read that are way above their reading level, the learners weren't going to read it anyway. So if they're going to use ChatGPT to summarize or say to them like a 5-year-old or simplify the reading, this is a good use. This is a good use of AI. I use it. If I'm reading a paper that's outside my field, I will use ChatGPT to summarize it for me. I don't want to go read. I was a computer scientist a long time ago. I don't want to read computer science papers now, but I want to know the gist of it. And sometimes the abstract isn't clear. So I would use ChatGPT like that. And I would encourage students to do that as well. I hope they would read the paper eventually, but if the teacher is going to give them something that's too hard for them, the other solution was either not to read it at all or to ask someone else to explain it to them, right? So if that's the case, I'm fine with them using AI for that. I just don't want them to be using AI instead of struggling to learn something important. So when you learn, I was telling students yesterday, I was just giving a session yesterday. I was talking about the Olympics, right? Because that's going on right now. And I talk about like the long distance runners. They run for I don't know how many kilometers or whatever. And I tell them, if they just wanted to get from point A to point B, they'd take a car.
Yes.
Why are they running? Like, why are they exhausting themselves and training for all these years just to be able to run a little bit faster than another person? Because the journey is more important than the destination. And you're challenging yourself to grow and become stronger in ways that, yes, there are other ways to get there. I don't need to run to get from point A to point B. I can just ride a car. But that's not the point, right? So what ChatGPT is like it's the car. But if you think even of like when I'm traveling with my daughter, right? And sometimes we're going somewhere, I'd rather walk because it's a new country and I have an opportunity to look around me and interact with people, and getting lost It's part
Yeah.
of the enjoyment of travel.
Yeah. The best
Yeah,
thing.
I love getting lost.
But a lot of
And
people are like,
that's what's
"Oh, like,
learning. You learn
mhm,
something extra when you get lost than if you just went straight
exactly.
to where you were going. And so I think that's what learning is. It's this
Mhm,
incidental,
mhm,
there's something more than getting to the end product. And if the way we do education is always focused on the end product
mhm.
rather than the enjoyment, you were just talking about this, right? If you
Yeah,
need to enjoy learning a language
yes.
and be intrinsically motivated to use it to communicate with other human beings that otherwise wouldn't understand you. But
Exactly.
then if you're just learning the grammar it's horrible to teach grammar. Even by the way, Egyptian curriculum, everything is like you're describing. Even the Arabic language, because I tell you the Arabic language we write is different than the Arabic we speak. So it's not
Mhm,
their native language, and they're just learning the grammar and the meanings of words and the opposites of words. And what am I going to do with this word ever in my life? You know?
yeah,
But how
exactly.
can I communicate in Arabic? They don't learn that. They don't learn how to read the newspaper.
Mhm.
They so it becomes this transactional thing that nobody's
So,
motivated to do, and it's hard because the way the brain works is you need to be making a lot of connections to be able to
okay,
remember something, to be able to use it and to access it easily. And
exactly.
so, of course, education needs to be different. Education needs to be more authentic and applied and to be based on experiences rather than things you get out of a book. And I think that's the way education always should have been. But I think because of AI now, it really has to be because when the internet came, all the
Mhm,
information became searchable. Of course, when the internet first came, it didn't have as much credible information, but now it does.
mhm.
But now with AI, a lot of the information isn't going to be credible because of the deep fake videos that it can create. Like the
Yeah,
amount of
exactly.
fakeness that's going to be out there is going to be incredible,
Mhm,
right? But then if my belief is if
mhm,
AI can do something
mhm,
and I as a teacher can't tell that this is not by my student, then my student should not have been doing this at all.
mhm,
If
mhm,
it's something the AI can do, then I shouldn't be asking students to do it.
mhm.
Let the AI do it and let the students do something more.
No.
So what they learn has to be something that's very personally relevant and contextual and culturally
Mhm,
related to them and so on. But of course, I understand that it's easy to say this in the kind of course that
yeah,
I teach. I know that if you're
yeah.
teaching like introductory biology,
Mhm.
you can't make it very difficult because it's introductory biology. You can't make it that difficult for them. But you can, if you have the resources, take them to the lab or get them to do small experiments at home where they're actually doing the thing with their own hands rather
Mhm.
than learning about it from a book. And that makes a huge difference. And then
So,
ChatGPT is not going to do that for them. It can write the report for them, but
yeah.
it won't have the actual experience instead of
Wow.
them. And
So,
we need to vary our assessments so that
mhm.
ChatGPT is quite exposed to a lot of assessments, right? It knows the way a lot of things are already been done before.
Ma'am, like, this podcast is actually, I will explain it to you. Like, we have started a series called Academiano when we were in our bachelor's degree, like first
Mhm.
year bachelor's, right? So basically,
Yeah.
we talked about horoscope and like technology. We got together and talked about it. But obviously, like when they graduated, yeah, people are going different directions. So then I started my master's. Then I thought that, okay, I mean, I like to go to lectures, but the thing is like sometimes the things are like, I need more engagement. So that's why I turned that program into a podcast. Then I
Mhm.
go to LinkedIn and I search a lot of professors and I read their papers. Then I invite them, okay, can I talk with you about these things? And then I think that's make this interesting a journey. But I know no one is doing it. Like in my
Wow.
master's, that's the thing. Like I talk to American lecturers. Now I'm talking to you, Indian professors and doctors. So I'm getting all these different perspectives. Then I have a lot to think about. Okay, Professor Bailey like told about this thing, so now I will read about these things. It makes me so happy at the end of the day, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But that's a good method to learn. But I thought that I should do it and I should talk to people just like the good old days and to learn from them rather than just me
Yeah.
in front of a computer.
I love that. I love this relationality of what you're describing. And there's two things that you're doing, right? So other than
Mhm.
just learning, you're learning in conversation with someone in dialogue. And you're also then podcasting it. So you're sharing it with other people so other people can
Yes.
learn from the conversations that you've had that they may not have the courage to go up to someone and tell them, come and meet me, you know?
Exactly.
So that takes a
Exactly.
lot of courage, what you're talking about. And
I've been turned upon by different people. Like some people like, no, I don't have time. Some people like they didn't even respond. Like nothing
yeah,
is.
yeah.
But
But
I
you have to
feel
be willing to take risks. And
yes,
if
like
1 out of 10 people responds, that's better than 0, right?
exactly. And that's what I went for. Like even my undergrad days also, like I didn't know anybody at the university, but I just like talked to them. Like, like I
Yeah,
just talked to them and got a lot of information for them. And when I was a child, I learned a lot from my grandfather and grandmother when they were like relating stories. I really loved it rather than reading it from a book. So I'm using
right.
the same thing here also. Like I'm listening to other people and trying to learn.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I love that. And speaking of
Mhm.
this aspect that you're talking about, whenever people talk about AI replacing anything, I think they don't replace relationships. And if
No.
I am, even if you make the AI conversational, which they are very conversational right now, I hate that because you're not real. I want real people that I can then have an actual relationship and go for dinner with and
Exactly.
hug and
Exactly.
and be
Yeah.
friends and go out and help me when my mother is sick and
Exactly.
be part of my child's upbringing. And these are things that AI is never going to do. What is wrong with you people? And
Exactly. Exactly.
so for example, so then I hadn't talked a lot about how teachers might use AI, right?
Mhm.
So there's all
Mhm.
kinds of ways that AI can be used in teaching, and most of them I don't like. So the
Mhm.
first one is using AI to give feedback to students. And a lot of times they say that because there's so many students and the teacher has 100 students. And I think the teacher shouldn't have 100 students. There
Mhm.
should be
Yeah.
teaching assistants
Yeah.
because students need more than intellectual and cognitive engagement. They need socio-emotional support. And
Exactly.
that's not just the teacher. Maybe the students can support each other as well, but they're also
Mhm.
young, usually. And so you need like a graduate student or something to help the teacher. And
Mhm.
you need to pay them. And then
Mhm.
that's a way for them to make money. And at the same time, you're saving time for the teacher and you're helping the student. But
Mhm.
having AI give feedback on writing
Yeah.
is just like, well, the student's going to write it with AI, the teacher is going to give feedback with AI, then they're going to put it through an AI plagiarism detector, and then that's not the purpose. The purpose of writing is to write for an audience
Yes.
so that you can express yourself so that someone understands what you're trying to say.
Mhm.
And so it shouldn't be done with something like AI. And
Ex-
the other thing is that we know AI generally reproduces bias. So bias is in feedback also. So the
Mhm.
more you don't write like a standard native English speaker, the
Mhm.
more likely the AI is going to critique the way you write. And then it's sort of putting you into a corner so that everybody writes the same, which we never should have been doing anyway. I think there's beauty. And one of the reasons it's easy to tell that a student at AUC has used AI is that they don't sound like an Egyptian person writing in English. They sound like a native person writing in English.
Exactly.
But my boss and we tested and said, write like a non-native speaker, and it can do that. But the students don't know that. They think they sound more impressive when they sound like they're English. And I'm
True.
like, no, you sound more fake.
Yes.
So,
True.
but then the kinds of implicit biases it
Mm.
reproduces is ridiculous. Like they've trained ChatGPT to say, I won't say offensive things, right? I won't say offensive jokes. But if you ask it in a subtle way, it reveals itself. So I'll give you an example that I think is really shocking.
Mhm.
So if you ask it, is a person from this country or that country more likely to be a terrorist? It will tell
Mhm.
you. And I tried ChatGPT, Gemini, I tried like 3 or 4 different tools. It'll tell you,
Okay.
no, 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 we're not allowed. Like you can't say that one nationality is more likely to be a terrorist than another. That's not okay to talk like that.
Mhm.
And then I ask a different question. So define terrorism and give me 5 examples.
Wow. Okay.
Now you
Okay.
know what's coming,
Yeah.
right? Like 3 or 4 or even 5 of these examples are going to be Muslim people. It's right there. It's right there. Yeah, it just needs a little bit of subtlety in how you ask, and then you find out that it's actually quite
Ma'am,
it's showing the bias. Yeah.
that's true. Like you brought up a very nice point. For my master's thesis, like we have a long way to go. We are still doing this coursework. But for my master's thesis, I was trying to do something related to communication and AI. But then I read a lot of things. Then I thought that like this, first of all, this is changing so fast. And like at the end of the day, humans matter, like talking, like the conversations like this matter rather than like deep fake video, just like computer giving you instructions. So I love technology. Like I use everything. Like I really love it. But at the end of the day, I feel like I'm a human, so I should like really like focus on like human things. But I don't know that's a correct way to think it. Like, but what do you think about it?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I like the technology that's going to help me connect with you, like the technology we're using to just
Yeah,
have this conversation. That is
ex-
technology I like.
exactly,
Knowing that certain people don't have electricity even to be able to do this, right?
exactly,
I
exactly.
remember when ChatGPT came out and they were talking about how like anybody can use it. I'm like anybody who has internet and
Yes.
electricity. And actually in Egypt it wasn't turned on. You had to pretend to have VPN to pretend you're in another country to use it. But anyway, people don't. Yeah, people don't. And Hong Kong, there are a few countries that didn't have it. But anyway, but yeah, for me, any technology that helps me connect with humans, I'm good with. Any
Wow.
technology that reduces human connection maybe is useful for people who are on the autism spectrum, but I think even people on the autism spectrum need to be able to live in our life and we need to learn to accept them. It's not, we shouldn't help them not have to connect with humans, if you know what I mean. Look, I think about some other things. I don't know if you have this in Sri Lanka. We don't have it here in Egypt, but you have it in the US and the UK and
Mhm.
Europe, where you have, instead of a supermarket, there's a person you talk to be able to pay. They have a machine where you put your credit card and you scan the
I have
things.
seen Walmarts and all those places, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know,
So
in Sri
that
Lanka.
it's quicker. Honestly, it's quicker. You don't have to stand in line. But then a lot of times it fails and you have to talk to a person.
Yeah.
But I also miss just saying hi to a person as you're buying things. And they were saying that elderly people who live alone, they need that human connection. And of course, the technology is complicated for them as well. And
Yeah.
and and then you're taking away people's jobs but maybe it allows them to sell faster or more or something. But you think about ATM, yeah, it's very to be able to get your cash out of a machine very quickly without having to take your turn in the bank. That's useful, but it's
Yeah.
useful because it frees up more time for customer service work in the bank. So if a technology is going to save time so that more human time, the valuable human interaction that does require dialogue and back and forth, I'm happy
Mhm,
with that. I
mhm,
think the problem is we don't know yet
mhm,
where ChatGPT is going to be helpful and where it's not, where it can be potentially harmful.
mhm,
And so where should we stop using it? But there's
mhm.
in the process of creating it, they've harmed a lot of human beings. I don't know if you know the story about the people, when I was telling you it won't tell offensive jokes.
Yeah. Mhm.
They they outsourced to a Kenyan company and to have human beings filter the
Mhm.
offensive content. And so they were
Oh,
exposed to a lot of offensive text and images, and they
really?
started to have mental health challenges before them
Wow.
and because of this, and OpenAI, which is the company that contracted them, did not help them with their mental health issues. And of course, they were underpaid. So there was this exploitation and harm that was happening to these
Wow.
people so that the AI that we see is not offensive. So to us, it looks like it's more ethical, but the
Yeah.
process of creating it was really harmful. And also, they say that a lot of the process of creating AI and training it on large data sets
Uh-huh.
is very bad for the environment. So it
Yes.
has an impact on climate, it has an impact on water. And actually, even every time we use it, we're making that worse. Now, I
Mhm.
think the internet's probably already doing that as well, but I think the impact with large language models like ChatGPT is a lot more.
Wow.
And that's not something that anybody's really doing anything about. Like we know it and we still use it.
Wow.
So I don't know.
Like my mind is like double blown. Like I wish like I could like talk to you for like days. I don't want to even have my lunch. I just I wish I could have that time. But I know like your time is very valuable. I'm not gonna take much of your time. But I just wanna know one thing. Like, what is the advice that you can give to a person, especially like me, people who are following their masters, maybe onto their journey to PhD? What is that one advice, or what is he or she should do in order to be like achieve those goals?
Wow. In general, your goals, so regardless of AI?
Yes, like just general, like, okay, if I'm
Yeah.
trying to achieve like masters, like, or PhDs, like, so what is that
Mhm.
advice that
My general advice, honestly, is don't let anybody limit your possibilities for you. You decide what you want to do with your life, and it doesn't matter if people tell you it's never been done before. It doesn't matter if people think it's not valuable. If you believe in something and you believe it's valuable, it's going to make you satisfied and fulfilled, go after it, find a way. If you believe in something, you'll find a way. Don't let anybody get in your way, and do what you do, Prabhupada. Like go for it, you know. It's not gonna necessarily work the first time. When you learn something or you try something at the beginning, you're likely to fail, and failure is okay. You learn. Every time you do something and it doesn't work, you learn something. And you'll get better at it. And ask for help. Ask people for help. You can always ask for help. I think people sometimes think that asking for help is failure. It's not. Always ask, find other people to help you get to where you need to go. And when something scares you because it feels like it's threatening, look it in the eye, and it's always going to be less scary than you think, I think.
Wow, that's such a great advice. So one more question, like now I have email to like many professors, like they and to South Korea. You even like read my email and like and respond it because like I mean, of course, you are a professor and you have other things to do. I'm like no, like I'm just like a kid from another country who's trying to do his masters. So why did you even like consider? Because it's a very big deal for me. I just want to know like what made you think, okay, I should come to this podcast and talk.
That's interesting. So I generally, if I get to see the email, I'm probably going to respond as long as you seem like a human being, not like a bot. For the most part, I'm happy to do this. I'm looking at the actual email you sent because I actually teach people sometimes how to write an email in order to get a response. And so the more personal the email is, the more likely someone will respond to you. So the subject invitation to be a guest on my podcast, that's generally something I'm happy to do. So maybe some people don't like to do that. Maybe that's why they don't respond, but I do. I'm happy with it. Professors have to do a lot of free labor in academia, and so sometimes they don't want to do any more of that. But I'm happy to do it. I'm fine with this. So you call me by name. You don't say dear professor. You say dear Professor Bali, which helps. You don't tell me what it is about my insights in education. If you tell them something more specific, like I've read your paper about so and so, they're more likely to feel like, oh, you've done your homework. You want to talk to them about something specific. They would do that. I think the more personal the email, the better. I generally also tend to be more likely to respond to somebody from the global south. I'm not going to not respond to someone from the global north. It's just that I see value in connecting with people who are not in the US or UK or Canada or something like that. So that was another reason that I respond. But I generally respond. So I'm not, I guess, not your typical person. The thing is, I sometimes just don't see emails because I have a lot of email, which is, I think, what most people, the problem with them is. And for example, I'm on Twitter and I'm LinkedIn, On Twitter, I'll see it. On LinkedIn, I might like not see it for weeks.
True. That's true. I got that advice from one of the professors also. Like I emailed her, then she said, okay, I can't come to the I can't attend your podcast. But the thing is, like when you are writing an email, like make it more personalized, like do some homework, and rather than not cold emailing someone, like come to my podcast, you just like do some home. It's just such a simple thing. Like it's just like you should like do it. But just like comes to your mind when you are just like try to like connect with a lot of people. Then because before, like I did like, okay, I take a list of people, I just like email, like come. Then I said, oh, shouldn't do it. I should be more human and I should like read their work. For example, from your background, I went to you have like a blog or something. Then I went, I read it and like I did some homework. Then I emailed you. So I did for like a couple of other people also, but it didn't work, like didn't even respond. But finally you responded. But I feel like what you're saying is true. Like we have to make it more like personalized when you are like try to connect with somebody, isn't it?
Yeah, because you didn't show me in the first email that you'd read
Mhm.
my blog or that
Mhm.
you understood what in the second email you did, but the
Yeah.
first one you didn't. And then
Yeah.
even the more specific, like there's something, so this is what I teach people. So with social media in general,
Mhm.
you can use it to broadcast, just share what you do.
Yeah.
You can use it to receive and listen to what other people do. But you can
Yeah.
also use it to target people, which is what you're doing. But if you don't already have relationships and you're not sustaining community, you're not listening and broadcasting regularly, then people don't know you. So sometimes, you know what happens, Prabodha? Someone will
Mhm.
contact me at a time that I'm busy, and I'll say, I'll get back to you, and I forget their name.
Yeah.
That's all that happened. I want to respond to you, but I've just forgotten your name, so I don't know how to find that email again. But sometimes it's someone who's been tweeting with me back and forth for a while, so I know their name, I'm familiar with their name. So when they ask me for something, I know who they are. Oh yeah, that's that person. Okay. So
Exactly.
that makes a difference. So it doesn't feel like a cold call then because you've already been on to their LinkedIn posts and been commenting on them, for example. Or of course, not everybody is very active on Twitter or LinkedIn or wherever anymore.
Mhm.
More so these days because of Twitter's, a lot of people left Twitter and then they're everywhere else.
Mhm.
But if you spend a lot of time sustaining relationships, then when you want something, it's easy. So this is what I've been doing most of my life, is
Wow.
just connecting with people, not because I want something from them, but just to know them. And then
Yeah.
when I want something from them, it's easy.
Yeah. I mean, one day I wish I could come to one of your lectures, in Cairo and like just listen. I don't want anything. I don't want any grades on it, but just like listen to you. Like it's such a like how to say like a breath of fresh air like into my life. I think I have a new POV of my life.
I put a
Uh,
link in the chat for you. I
and,
co-created this website during the pandemic. It's
uh-huh,
Equity Unbound is a grassroots movement like I've done with some of my colleagues from all over the world.
okay.
And we created the site or how to build community online. Okay.
Mhm.
Now, how to
Wow.
build community online is something during the pandemic, people who never taught online, they didn't know how to do this. So we
Mhm.
created demo videos of activities you can do to introduce students to just warm up at the beginning of class. And so if you watch some of these videos, I'm the one who's presenting. So it's as if I'm teaching, but the people in the room are other teachers. And
Mm.
so they just pretend that they're students and we do it. And then we reflect on this activity and how
Mhm.
could you do it if you didn't have breakout rooms, but you're working synchronously, but what if you want to do it asynchronously? So we think about different ways of doing the same activity in different contexts.
Mhm.
So you'll get to know a lot about how, and there's a lot of other people suggesting activities, but I invite people I know to suggest the activities. So they're all people whose philosophy of teaching I mostly agree with. So
Oh, that's such
that's
a
if,
That's really nice. I'll check it out, ma'am. Like definitely, definitely. Now you have given me a lot of materials to think through the day. Like I
yeah.
think I will sleep less hours tonight. Like searching all these. Definitely. And ma'am, thank you very much for giving me this time. Just doing it for free. Like I'm really thankful to you. Like
No
I
problem
owe
at all.
you a lot.
I really enjoyed the conversation. I'm very happy to meet you. And if you need anything else while you're for anything, just let me know.
Definitely, ma'am. Thank you very
It was
much,
such a
ma'am.
pleasure.
We'll end the podcast, and I'll send you the link after I have edited these things. And
Thank you so
uh,
much.
thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank
Thank you.
you. Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Bye bye.
Have a good rest of your day.
You too,
Bye.
ma'am. Bye.